Welcome to this webinar, Blockchain as an Innovative Tool to Promote the Implementation of the Nagoya Protocol and ABS, organized by the UNDP-GEF Global Project on ABS. My name is Alejandro Lago, and I'm the manager of this project. Let me very quickly indicate the layout of today's webinar. First of all, we are going to have a short, very brief introduction of the UNDP-GEF Global ABS project, and also the introduction to the global ABS community. Our main speakers today are going to be Dr. Shada Al-Salamat, who is going to talk about blockchain in a nutshell, what non-experts need to know. And then we will have Mr. Carlos Ruiz, who is going to introduce how to make fair chocolate bars with blockchain, the pilot experience in Ecuador. Before opening the session on questions and answers, we will have some reflections to start the debate, the dialogue on whether blockchain can improve the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol and ABS. And we will also talk about prospections for a blockchain project with United Resources. So before we're going into the topic, I would like to very briefly introduce you the Global ABS project. I promise I will be very brief, and apologies for those of you that are already familiar with the project. The Global ABS project is a 3-year project funded by the Global Environment Facility and directly implemented by the United Nations Development Programme Istanbul Regional Hub. The project covers 24 countries, as you can see in the map, around the world, and each country receives $350,000 of direct jet funding, and with an average of co-financing per country of $700,000. The objective of the project is strengthening human resources, legal frameworks, and institutional capacities to implement the Nagoya Protocol, or how I like to express it, make legal access to genetic resources the rule and not the exception, making benefit sharing also the rule and not the exception. Although it is a global project, most of the activities are conducted at the national level under 3 different components. The first component focuses on legal frameworks and institutional capacity to implement ABS measures at national level. The second one focuses on building trust, in particular focuses on biodiscovery and building the necessary trust between providers and users of genetic resources. Third component is a key component and is focusing on indigenous peoples and local communities, because they are not simply stakeholders, but they are right holders in the case of their traditional knowledge and their genetic resources. Therefore, it's crucial to increase their understanding and capacities to manage those resources. In addition to these 3 components that are mainly handled at the national level, the project has a 4th component where we have the direct support of our partners from United Nations volunteers, which is the creation of a community of practice on ABS and a more dynamic South-South collaboration on ABS. With this short introduction, let me give the floor to my colleague from UNB, Fernando Lopez, to introduce the main features of the online platform of the Community of Practice on ABS, or as we like to call it, the Global ABS Community that we are officially launching today.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. The Global ABS Community is the community of practice of the UNDP-GEF Global ABS project, a space to share experiences, knowledge, and best practices on the ABS thematic. The implementation of this community of practice is carried out by the United Nations Volunteers Program as a responsible party and implementation member. UNV is responsible for the design, implementation, and operation of the Global ABS Community of Practice, work that is currently carried out by 2 UN volunteers. In the Global ABS Community, you can access a variety of ABS content, ranging from case studies, infographics, webinars, online courses, testimonials, among others. You can share with local, regional, or global partners information related to the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol on access and benefit sharing, and most importantly, boost and support the establishment of a global cooperation framework on ABS. This community of practice will be divided or is divided currently in 4 main thematic areas. The first thematic areas, called ABS legal frameworks, deals with the implementation of national regulations on ABS, included but not limited to genetic resource monitoring, intellectual property, traditional knowledge, and ABS clearinghouse. The second thematic area, private sector and industries, covers topics related to business models, ABS, and value chain, by prospection and ABS legal contracts in industries. The third thematic area, sustainable development goals, covers topics related on how ABS support the achievement of the sustainable development goals and the 2030 agenda. The last component, traditional knowledge, presents a space for collaboration related to indigenous people and local communities, the preservation of traditional knowledge, and the implementation of biocultural community protocols at the community level. The cooperation framework supported and promoted by the global ABS community is based on a series of on-site and online activities carried out in the 24 countries in which the UNDP-GEF Global ABS project is currently being implemented. The logic behind the framework of the global ABS community is to promote activities based on local context, needs, and requirements, and sharing them with other participants. So, if you wish to join the global ABS community, we invite you to visit www.community.abs-sustainabledevelopment.net, or you can simply scan the QR code on your screen, register on the platform, and create a member profile. You can now access and share ABS-related content and be part of a network of experts and interested parties in the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol on access and benefit sharing globally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fernando, for this quick introduction to the global ABS community, and we expect all the participants to join very quickly this community and to actively participate in it. Let me highlight that we are not just the Global ABS project, but there are other important national UNDP-GEF projects on ABS, as you can see in the map, and that the final objective of all of this is to create this virtuous circle of ABS, where governments establish clear and effective ABS legal frameworks, indigenous peoples and local communities are fully capable and fully involved and provide access to the genetic resources, being part of the benefit sharing, where research institutions and scientific centers comply with the system, puts into value biodiversity of the country, and are able to channel research and development back into the country. And of course, we need private sector to comply with all these procedures, to keep working on biotech, generating research and development, creating new products that can produce benefits, and at the same time, those benefits can be shared, can make an impact back to the original providers. In that circle is that we would like to see whether blockchain can play a role. And why blockchain and ABS? Well, blockchain, as you can see in the screen, is a trendy topic for everyone, even for UNDP. If you open our main webpage, undp.org, you will have the first screen would be related to using blockchain to advance the Sustainable Development Goals. So I invite you to go there and to explore the different areas where we are exploring as UNDP the use of this modern technology. But of course, today we want to better understand in simple terms how this technology works, and we have the privilege of having Dr. Shada Al-Salamat, who is a contributor to the global healthcare sector modernization movement through her work on secure, mobile, and intelligent solutions for emerging healthcare delivery models using blockchain and open algorithms. She is currently a visiting scholar at the MIT Media Lab, working with Professor Alex Sandy, Pentland's Human Dynamic Group. She is also an assistant professor of healthcare information system security at King's South University. and serves as the Vice President of the mHealth Solutions Divisions at Ammar IT. Thank you so much, Sada, Dr. Sada, for being with us today, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Alejandro, for this lovely introduction, and welcome all to this webinar. I'm very happy to be here and pleased for the invitation. Thank you very much. Now, can you all see my screen? If it shows, then I would like to present to you the what exactly I'd like to introduce to you, or let me explain to you what exactly you need to know about blockchain in a nutshell, and as non-experts. So let's start off by talking about what exactly blockchain is. And when we go, I've been to different conferences. When I speak to people and I talk to them, when I start learning about blockchain, all they tell me is that it is actually a distributed ledger technology. But it is rare that anyone actually explains what that means. So let me explain to you what a distributed ledger technology is, which is exactly what blockchain is. Let me give you an example. In order to do that, I'll give you an example of banking system or any other system that exists today traditionally, and how blockchain actually transforms that into a distributed ledger. Now, traditionally speaking, systems like the banks and there are actually centralized ledger, a type of ledger where the information and communication is actually happening. So I'll give you an example. When you transfer money between one country to another, one bank to another, normally we do it through a bank, whether mobile bank or we go to the branch. And from there, we do the transaction. Now, the money is not received immediately in the other bank account. For example, if I want to send money from my bank account to my mom's bank account, she doesn't receive it immediately. It takes a couple of days. And it's worse. It is even worse if it's across different countries where this money goes between different banks. Now, this transaction, the minute I do it, I just go home and wait for the money to be received. What happens behind the scene is that it goes to through a different process, a different activity in a process where it gets authorized by the bank. Not only my bank, also my mom's bank. And also, sometimes they take fees from my bank and from the other bank in order to process this money transfer. This is because there is a single authority and a centralized authority in the middle where they oversee the transactions, authorizes them, and sometimes taking fees for that. Now, let's look at the other decentralized type of ledger, which exactly how blockchain transfers that traditional system into a distributed one. When I say distributed, I mean a different multiple parties involved, and they have the very same authority. They don't have a single centralized authority where they control the transactions. Meaning, if I would like in that scenario to transfer money to my mom, immediately the money is received in her bank account. And Bitcoin is one example of cryptocurrency where the money application of a blockchain is being used. So I don't need to take anyone's permission to transfer my money to my mom's account, and immediately me and her would see that we have the equivalent amount that we actually aim to have in our bank account. So no one can get to take any fees. No one can get to say exactly whether it needs to verify it or actually control the transaction. And it's done instantly because there is the man in the middle, or someone who's, the single authority is not available at all in a distributed ledger. And this is exactly what blockchain is. It gets rid of the centralized authority to have a distributed one where everyone gets the same authority level. That's very generally speaking. Now, what is it used for? Generally speaking as well, not in a specific system. Now, what it helps with is that it aims to hold transaction data for traceability as one very key use of blockchain, to trace the transactions on a specific transactional data on a specific asset. This asset could be money, like I showed you in the previous example when we talked about transferring money. But I can actually do other transactions. I can actually trace a diamond when it comes to tracking gemstones or valuable assets. Sometimes they use blockchain for tracking organs. So those assets or things that I'm tracking could be money, or could be any other tangible or intangible asset. It could be sometimes just a description of something. It could be sometimes, like a vaccine, and could be medication. So what the aim, or it's used mainly for tracking transactional data on a specific asset, whether tangible or intangible. Now, the idea is that this ledger, okay, that is used for traceability, is shared among distributed network of nodes, and those nodes are actually the parties, could be people, could be systems, that can have a copy, an exact copy of that specific ledger that tells me what happened to that data asset. And it enables a peer-to-peer communication, because the way distributed works is not a centralized authority where it has to go through someone in the middle in order to go to the other side. What happens is that communication between me and my mom's bank account happens immediately as a peer-to-peer, meaning from my point to their point, without having anyone in the middle to interrupt it or to authorize it or verify it. And that's why it enables a peer-to-peer communication without the need for an intermediary, which is, in our example in the bank, the centralized authority. And finally, this kind of new infrastructure allows for transactional applications between different parties, regardless of the asset, regardless of the industry, or regardless of the context. And in our example here today, we're talking about the use of it in pharmaceuticals, specifically speaking for genetic resources. And this is what blockchain is mainly used for, to track transactional data about a specific asset. Now, how does it look like? If we look on the screen here, we can see that it looks exactly like a chain. That's why it's called a blockchain. But this chain consists of block units that are connected with each other. So if we look at block J, which is in the middle, it has a link to a previous block unit and another block unit afterwards. So it gives you the series of block units that are connected together, and the order of those block units is actually done in timeline. That means that block J-1 happened before J, and also J happened before J+1. This is the order in timeline, and this is how it looks like generally also speaking. Now let's have a closer look at one of those units of blockchain, and it consists, there are different types of blockchain, but generally speaking as well, I'm here giving a general abstract to explain exactly what it means, regardless of the application and the details of the application. So if we look at a block unit, we will find that it has a header, it has a content, and it also has a signature, or let's say a button section, where it actually gives you the signature of who generated that block unit. And let's explain each one of those. In the block header, it gives me an ID of that block. So I know that this block unit belongs to a blockchain that has a specific ID. And this block unit have an address, meaning it has another ID that's specifically unique to it. So you can search a block unit from any interface that you use, whether you use a web application, regardless of how it's implemented. It can use a mobile application to search for a specific block unit. But for our example in Bitcoin, use the wallets. Wallets are the mobile applications where you actually have access to the blockchain, and also to generate a new block unit whenever you buy or sell any Bitcoin. And any block unit that has been added, there is an address for it that is linking it to the previous block unit that is before that in time. And also it adds a time stamp. So in the header, you will have an ID for the blockchain, you will have an address for this unit, and an address for the previous unit to make sure that it links to it. And it also has the timestamp. Finally, in the block header, you will see the consensus protocol, meaning how that block unit has been added to the blockchain on what basis. Because we mentioned before that a distributed ledger has no single authority that can verify or tells or confirm or agrees on whether this block unit has to be added. So in that case, before creating a blockchain, there is a need for a protocol where everyone in the network agrees on which basis the block unit will be added. And this protocol in every block unit. This is the content that is in every block unit. and it's identical to all the block units. This is how it's identifying it in relation to the big picture, which is the blockchain. And the signature down there, the purple side here, where we say the private and public keys, this is to give a digital signature of the author of that block unit. It tells who exactly added this block unit. And this is a very important feature, which I'm going to explain to you later in the slides. Why do we need to know who created that block unit? Okay, but the most important section of that block unit is actually the asset transaction data, meaning here are the details of the block unit that any application will have. So this is adjustable to the application. And if we're talking about Bitcoin, which is the selling and buying of cryptocurrency, then here it says who owns how much. Sorry, this is a block unit, so it can tell me exactly the amount of money that someone is selling to someone else. For example, in my case, when I need to transfer $10 to my mother, then here it says that Shada is actually transferring $10 or 10 Bitcoin to Laila Kar, who's my mother. And this is in the block unit. This has the details of the information that we're tracking about the asset. And in that example, it will have the money. In different examples, it will be the organ, or it could be any information related to the asset we're trying to track. And this gives it the flexibility. So after talking about the anatomy of the block unit and how exactly it fits the bigger blockchain picture and how it's been used, let's talk about the different types of blockchain. So they're not all the same. Bitcoin is only one type. And there are 4 different types, general types of Bitcoin blockchain. That one of them fits the Bitcoin. But on what basis the differences between the different blockchain types are? First is the accessibility, and the second is the visibility. So the different types will determine who can access and write to the blockchain, and the other one will talk about who can read from the blockchain. I understand some of you might ask now that, okay, we mentioned that there is no single authority. Why someone decides who to write to it? And I'll tell you why and how now. In the 4 examples I'm going to give for each type of the different 4 types of blockchain. Let's start by one of them, which is the permissionless private. Now we have private type and we have public. And we also have permissionless and permissioned. Okay, so if it's permissionless, that means the accessibility is actually very high, meaning no permission to actually write to it. And when we say permissioned, we mean that it's only specific to those in the network. So only those in there can write to it. And this is when there is a group of people who have an application specific for them, and they are in the network. But once they are in, anyone can write to it. The other type could be a permissioned, which could, a public one, which will increase the visibility. So a private one will be less visible, meaning it's only within the network. And if it's public, that means the visibility is higher. More people can read from and get to access the ledger and see what's happening there. So let's take those examples to explain about the accessibility and the visibility. Let's start by the permissionless private, which is on the top left hand side. A permissionless private one, example for it is actually voting and public polls. This means that it is accessible to all the citizens or the people. It's open. It is only open to a specific community, which is the citizens of that city. So you don't want, for example, Saudis to vote to contribute to the voting system in America. So that has to be specifically for that specific group of people, and those are the people who can be part of that network using their social security number, for example. But anyone who's in that private network can actually vote and can write to that. That's why the accessibility is high, meaning anyone can write to it as long as they're part of that network. And because it's a specific network, that's why it's private. And that's the example of the public polls. On the other hand side, if we go to a permissionless public, meaning like Bitcoin, that means the accessibility is so high, everyone can write to it, and also everyone can see it. And that's why it's a very, very free infrastructure, the Bitcoin. Anyone can actually buy and sell and join. You don't need a specific community or network of people because it's open to the whole world. But some governments actually block access to the Bitcoin, especially in the Middle East. People, they cannot actually trade in Bitcoin. This is when the government blocks access to this, although it is publicly available. And Ethereum is another cryptocurrency platform where you can actually buy and sell cryptocurrency. Now, another example is the permissioned. The third example is the permissioned public. Permissioned means not anyone can write to it because it's a specific group of people in the network, but it is publicly available for anyone to see, but not anyone to write. And I'll give you an example for that. Food supply chain. There's some fish market, that allow some governments would allow their citizens to be able to see how the fish is being taken from the river and until it goes to the restaurant. So in that case, you can see that anyone can see the fish, but not only those who are in the supply chain can contribute and write to the ledger, but all the public can actually see it. And the least permissioned and private type of blockchain are those who are in the medical records. So only doctors who are in a specific network can get to contribute, write, and see the blockchain, and not everyone can see anyone's blockchain. So these are the 4 different types. Now I'll briefly talk about the 2 things in blockchain. After we describe the different types, how can we build a layer of trust using blockchain? Because that's the most important thing about it. About the technology, we can build trust. And because it builds a trustless system where you don't have to trust the system, the people, but you only trust the infrastructure. Because it allows for traceability, it allows for mutability, and consensus. And what those exactly mean is that you can always know who added digitally, who owns that block unit, meaning I can go back to the individual and track them down. Also, it gives me a timestamp so it can trace, based on the timeline. And also it gives you decides the exact group where you can track the group who are actually contributing to that. So it's traceability of the data as well of the transaction. Immutability, meaning no one can change any block unit after it's been added to the blockchain. And this is very important. That's why it gives trust, because no one can tamper with that block unit. And finally, consensus, meaning everyone in that network should agree to the content of and have a protocol, agree on a protocol on which decides exactly how the block unit is being added. And finally, I'm going to conclude with an argument, or let's say a debate between what is the impact of blockchain on our environment. And there are actually 2 different opinions here. One that says that actually blockchain is harming our environment, and the other one says that it's actually saving it. So some findings from reports published by the 5th Assessment Report and actually the United Nations Environmental Program shows that temperatures have reached a new high due to carbon pollution. That is a direct result of human activities, and we can always sense that from global climate change. And that's why each of the last 3 decades have been successfully warmer on the Earth's surface than earlier decades since 1850. And we all know this as a fact. Now, one group of people, on one hand, some groups say that blockchain systems, especially those used for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies like Ethereum, are enormously energy intense. That's because billions of calculations. That's why the consensus protocol is actually is based on calculations, and so in order to mine the blockchain and add any block unit, you need to do lots of calculations that actually chew up computer power and electricity, often powered by coal and other fossil fuels. That's why blockchain and cryptocurrency computations use more electricity than the entire nation of Ireland and far less than all of Google. So even Google doesn't use blockchain, but still the energy is less than that. Therefore, some believes that the turning off all of those computers and the blockchain computers computing blockchain and shutting them down will actually have an immediate positive impact on the environment while losing nothing of real value. But on the other hand, just last year in September, specifically in September 2018, the World Economic Forum issued The Building Blockchainers Chains for a Better Planet reports that identifies 65 existing and emerging blockchain use cases that could repair some of the world's global environmental change. The report says that it could enable a next generation sustainability monitoring. So here I'm just giving you an example of the two different debates that actually says or argues that blockchain can save and also harm the environment at the same time. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that really helped you understand what blockchain is at a nutshell. And now I'll hand it over.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asalama, for this fantastic presentation to clearly understand this new technology in an easy way for non-experts. Thank you for the effort of covering such a huge topic and very technical one in 15 minutes. So I appreciate your effort, and I'm sure there will be different questions for you at the end of the session. No? Actually, I have a couple of questions, but let's see what other attendees will raise during the session on questions and answers. Now that we understand a bit better what is blockchain and how it works, we are curious and want to learn more about how this technology is being applied to different value chains. And in this sense, we have the honor of having today with us an UNDP colleague working in Ecuador, Mr. Carlos Ruiz, who is going to introduce the pilot case they are conducting at the moment in Ecuador in the production of chocolate bars from Ecuadorian cocoa. Mr. Carlos Ruiz Giraldo is the coordinator of the Inclusive Economic Development Cluster and Risk Management at UNDP Ecuador. He holds a master's degree in Public Policy and Administration and a master's in Energy Governance. Carlos has more than 15 years of experience working in development in different organizations, focusing on post-disaster recovery, livelihoods, private sector, and value chain development. His main interests are currently innovation processes applied to inclusive economic development. Mr. Ruiz, you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be able to explain and tell you guys about our experience here in Ecuador. First, I just wanted to explain a little bit on the context. We applied to this country investment facility, which is an initiative from the headquarters of UNDP, in order to start thinking and implementing projects that might lead us to a more innovative approaches for tackle development problems. And we applied thinking about a solution for improving the traceability of the value chains here in Ecuador. And this is why linked to some information that we got from and things and papers that we read about the application of the blockchain technology in different value chains, as Professor explained before. We were interested in seeing if it could be possible to trace and to start doing a pilot here in Ecuador for tracing cocoa beans from the tree to the bar. So we wanted to start thinking about on how how the traceability could improve the farmers' lives and income, as well as to improve also and have a partnership with one of the projects that we are also running here in Ecuador, which is focused on preserving the forest in the Amazon. So we were thinking about creating this radical different chocolate bar, thinking about the fact that we wanted to use blockchain as a way on, or as a mechanism. This is something that we are testing that might work really well, might not. But you know, this is the idea. This is one of the reasons why UNDP is investing in these flagship initiatives. So because we wanted to know if blockchain could be a solution for not only for the Ecuadorian cacao industry, but also something that could be used for the sector as a whole, and focusing especially on the farmers that provide the raw material for the chocolate bars. So this was sort of our moonshot of the thing that we wanted to accomplish, and with the idea that with this example we could afterwards document everything and have some sort of a cookbook, so other UNDP offices can use it in different contexts, in different countries, and also in different value chains, as we saw in the presentation before. So what we wanted to do is use this blockchain solution. For this, we partnered with an NGO from the Netherlands called Fairchain, They have been also familiar. They have been already familiar with the technology, and they have been already implementing this in Ethiopia with coffee beans. And we partnered with them after doing a long search and with the help from friends of the Alpine Lab in Istanbul, where they partnered with us in order to design this idea of how we can improve the income of farmers and increase the traceability of the chocolate that they are eating in order to improve the livelihoods of the farmers in the Amazon. So why we opted for blockchain? Because we thought that this was a very interesting idea on how to see if we could, given the fact that we're a small country and the piloting and the testing could be a little easier compared to other countries which are bigger. So what we wanted to do is to prove and have this idea that we can, the consumer has in a way a big chunk of the power within the value chain. And this is why we thought that by creating a chocolate bar that could have a story behind it that is proving that we are conserving not only the forests in the Amazon, but also providing a better livelihood and a better income for farmers will be something that consumers will take into account, that will in a way influence their decision when they're facing the choice of selecting a chocolate bar with similar conditions from a commercial traditional bar and the bar that we wanted to create. So this is the blockchain will be in this case the mean on how the consumer will be able to trace and to see it and to make sure that the things that we are offering, the promise that we are offering with this chocolate bar, is actually a reality, and how the consumer can check this out if this is really real. We partnered up with APEOSAE, which is a farmers association in the south of the Amazon of Ecuador. They are producing organic cacao, and we have been partnering with them also because of the fact we're also working with them in improving their entrepreneurial capacities with another project that we're working with here in UNDP Ecuador. And they have been very fundamental to the project because they will be the final participants, and they will be the ones at the end of the day that when we partner with them, they will get all the recipes and all the brands that we will be testing. The idea, as I mentioned, is to create this chocolate bar where we will, hopefully we will start having, we're trying to produce around 20,000 bars, which will be sold in the UK market. Hopefully we will be launching them in April, this April. So after we designed this recipe, we designed the brand, we designed the package and everything that comes with the chocolate, and we manufactured it in Ecuador, all those assets will be transferred to this association. So in the future, once they have tested the product, they have a recipe, and they have a brand, and they have a packaging, they could go and find angel investors to create a share value company. And this is where we also partnered with a private sector entity, a chocolate maker here in Ecuador, who is also interested in joining the project, and not only as somebody who will manufacture the chocolate for us, but also is interested in contributing as well by designing the recipe, given the fact that they already have experience in the chocolate market. They already have everything set up in order to start producing chocolate. And Third Chain, which is the organization that I talked about, is conducting and is helping us out conducting market studies on see what is the kind of chocolate that they want, and what are the things that could make this consumer more to choose our bar toward instead of another. So these are the things that right now we're designing here right now, and this market study will allow us to design actually this brand and this package and this idea and this recipe that Hoja Verde will also contribute with this idea. So as I mentioned to you, the idea is that those market studies will allow us to know what kind of product we need to sell. If we need to put chocolate, or we need to put the nuts, or how much sugar, or no sugar, or raw cocoa, whatever. What is our best market to go for? We decided to go for the UK because we haven't found any similar products that could compete, or we might see that there is a niche that we can exploit, given the fact that Ecuador is not, we will never be competitive in volume, but we can be competitive in the specialty cocoa, which is a fino de aroma variety that we sell. So we think that the UK market is a market that will be interested in our product, and we are trying right now to figure out where and what is the better way to sell it. If we should go to retailers, or this is something that we are right now doing all the analysis in order to define this market strategy, in order to reach the customers and reach the consumers in a better way, and to know and to learn exactly what is the best market and how this market is reacting to these hypotheses that we have, developing them and thinking that the consumer will change his selection of chocolate bar based on that. So the idea is that we want to reach this conscious consumer. We're trying to define exactly the demographics of it. We have some work already set up. We have a good idea right now of what is the consumer that we're targeting in the UK, and based on that things we are right now designing all these brand issues and marketing strategies in order to reach there. One of the things that we also want to reach, of course, is the fact that we need to show that blockchain and this idea of blockchain of traceability and improvement of the cocoa value chain will also benefit the manufacturers and the private sector by reducing costs and increasing their involvement into more social responsible practices. I already mentioned that the United Kingdom was a choice for market, and we might also go to the Netherlands depending on what is the scale that we're producing and the amount of bars that we are able to send. So this is a sort of a small background that we have. We can show you how long is the project, what are we doing right now. We are already going on the testing of the prototype design of the chocolate bar. We will start hopefully production in the next couple of weeks, and based on that we will be able to, once we have the first 1,000 pieces of chocolate, and we will have a basic pilot on how is doing this chocolate bar, we'll be able to start sending the other bars as well. Right now, as I mentioned to you, this has been a very interesting, has had a very interesting learning curve. And since this is not a very typical UNDP project, we usually have a very complicated way as well how to set up and design our projects. But given the fact that the innovation was one of the core things that we had to use as a mechanism to develop a project, we have been learning a lot. And some of the things and some of the assumptions that we had at the beginning have changed, given the fact that this technology as well is also very interesting, and the fact that thanks to having found a very understanding partner, and a partner that already had a blockchain platform developed, has allowed us to reduce a lot of costs in that side. As I mentioned to you, we have used this sort of scheme where we are seeing that we are following a very traditional element related to the access to the market. So right now, as you can see, we are also we're finishing up a little bit the design phase, and we're starting to entering the experiment phase, where we will position those bars in the UK and start selling them. And after we start selling them, we will start collecting data and see how the platform and how the blockchain solution is using up. Also, because of the limited quantity of funds that we have, the issue of selecting every single one of the points that we want to trace will be of a limited scope. It will be a very small test because of the place where all the farmers are located is very close to the place, to the main center of this association, which will allow us to reduce a lot of costs. And also the fact that this is one of the issues that we also face, is that not everywhere you can find a reliable internet connection. So this is also another idea that we have this controlled risk of the fact that we're going also with Apeo because they have a better connection, and we know that all those information and data will be updated to those servers, will be an easy exercise for farmers as well. We also need to invest a very good amount of time in order to give the farmers not only the tools that they need, but also to make sure that the things that we're asking them to do is not going to be an extra burden, or is something that is going to complicate their daily jobs or tasks. The idea is actually the opposite, that we want to make their lives easier, and start to helping them out with their processes in a better way. So this is what I have to tell you. It was a very short thing, and I'll be happy to take any questions. And thank you for this opportunity. I give you the floor back.
Thank you very much, Carlo, for summarizing and introducing the key elements of such an interesting and innovative project that you are conducting in Ecuador. And we look forward not only to getting the results of this pilot project through its implementation, but we really hope that not all the bars, the chocolate bars, go to the UK, but some are sent to Panama also to taste them. So before opening, which I'm sure is going to be an interesting round of questions and answers, I would like to share with you very quickly in 2 minutes, share with you some reflections on blockchain and ABS. No? Of course, the first question after these enlightening presentations on the topic could be, could blockchain improve the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol and ABS? For me, in order to evaluate the potential use of the tool on ABS, I have highlighted or summarized the following key challenges of the Nagoya Protocol and ABS. No, I'm not trying to say that these are the only challenges that we are facing, but probably the main challenges that we are facing in the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol and the ABS principles. No? Of course, the first one is the origin, no, and the traceability of the genetic resources and the associated traditional knowledge, no, and how to monitor their utilization around the globe. No? And I think it was clear from the presentation that if applied from the beginning to all the steps of the ABS value chain, blockchain has the potential to improve the traceability of genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge and the monitoring of their utilization, no? Because traceability was one of the key elements highlighted, no, of this technology by Dr. Shada. Another key issue is the negotiation of mutual returns, no? The establishment of ABS contracts. Here, again, I believe if there are standardized ABS contracts that can be applied once again from the beginning to the end of the value chain, blockchain has again the potential of reducing transaction costs, no? Because we would be moving to smart contracts, we would be moving to a more fair, probably, negotiation, no, of those terms with indigenous and local communities. Another key point or key challenge is ensuring compliance with legal frameworks, mutual agreed terms, no, and the contracts. And of course, if blockchain is able to improve traceability, as it was mentioned before, for sure it's going to improve compliance. But we have to be careful because this is going to be very much dependent on the broader application of the tool. What I'm trying to say is that outsiders, people not using this technology, will be able to continue not complying with the ABS regulations. And this is not going to be solved by blockchain. No? Last but not least, a key challenge of the ABS negotiations and the Nagoya Protocol is reaching the local level, no? Going down to the local level. So distributing benefits to indigenous peoples and local community. Another key feature of blockchain highlighted by Dr. Shada was the issue of distributed, no? And in particular, I believe this technology, the use of blockchain, can contribute to have direct payments, no, to communities. This will be easy to make, and they could be done in a more direct fashion, reducing intermediary transactions and possibly reducing also different levels of corruption. Those are my quick reflections, but of course, this is just the beginning. Blockchain is kind of magic, as we have seen, but in my perspective, it is not complete magic in the sense that it cannot solve all the problems of countries and stakeholders. Of course, they need to establish proper ABS systems to apply this tool. Otherwise, it will not serve any purpose. No? Finally, from our side, UNDP, through the Global ABS project, is ready to embark in a pilot project to test blockchain technology in genetic resources and ABS. In that sense, the Global ABS project is offering its 24 countries and all its partners for that test. However, we would like to enter into this pilot with strong partners, in particular, private biotech companies that want to show and prove that they are ABS compliant and they operate under the axiom that ABS is genetic resources for sustainable development. Please do not hesitate to contact us in case you, your company, or your institution has interest in getting involved in testing this technology with us. Well, with these final messages, let me open a first round of questions to the participants. You have been sending some of your questions during the session, but you can write even more questions using the button that refers to questions. You can write down your question and we will select now some of them for our speakers. So first of all, we have a question from Grace Tena, who is asking what infrastructures are needed to start a blockchain, for instance, in the case of Ecuadorian cocoa industry. I believe this goes to both Dr. Shada and to Carlo. But Carlo, as is referring to the case in Ecuador, do you want to start with your answer? What infrastructures are needed to start a blockchain, for instance, in the case of Ecuador cocoa industry?
Thank you for the question. Actually, that was one of the first concerns that we had in the beginning because we haven't dealt with this kind of technology before. And the fact, as I mentioned before, that we partnered with Virtuous and they already had a platform operating, so that saved a lot of cost on the fact that we didn't have to create a new platform for ourselves. And the second thing is right now, this is actually what we are doing in the field. We're sort of designing all the system to see how many points of entry of data we're going to need. This is not something that in the beginning is going to be very complicated. We're thinking about mostly using small tablets or smartphones that will be connected directly, or they can upload or gather the information, not necessarily connected right away, but as soon as they get to a specific point within the association, all the data will be uploaded. So this first phase does not require to buy a lot of hardware. The platform itself will be linked to those devices. And as I mentioned before, the platform was already created. So that was one of the things that we also, that's a saving of time, of money as well. And we can go as far as we want with this. I mean, we can also, we're thinking about maybe it would be nice and interesting to start dealing with the Internet of Things, like starting using sensors to send information, for example, to determine if the soil where the plant has been harvested is organic or not. So a sensor will send information right away and will let everybody know that this is organic or not, because it will test if there are any chemicals in the plantation or not. So it will depend on the scope of the project, but right now in the case of Ecuador, it's not going to be very complicated. We're talking about no more than 20 tablets or smartphones, plus a couple of computers.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Carlo, for that answer. Shada, Dr. Shada, do you want to add something to that?
Yes, please, if you may allow me. Thank you very much,
Sure.
Carlos, for the answer. From a general perspective, not from a specific use case, how to fit blockchain into any platform or for any specific use case, in my opinion, that blockchain doesn't exist as a technology alone. It has to be built on top of another infrastructure that has the specific application for it. It needs to be put in a platform where you can actually read and write. So, and use that ledger. How do you want to record the information that you want to store in the block content? And how would you like to receive it? And these are, complement the solution where you're bringing the blockchain in. And these platforms could be, You can build it on top of mobile application platform. You can build it on top of Internet of Things, where you have sensors, wearables, and some small computation devices without an interface. So you can use the blockchain for that, for the input and output of information, reading and writing to those devices. Also, some applications that I've seen, or infrastructure that I've seen, are related to business process management system. So they design the whole business process to automate a process in any context, and then they build the blockchain on top of it to actually get to track the changes in that process for the activity. Just last comment is that most of the people, they don't store a lot of information in the blockchain, because the more information you have there, the more time it's going to take to mine the block unit and add it to the blockchain, and this will consume a lot of energy. So they have off-chain data, and they have on-chain or on the blockchain data, and this is when they use it with another database management system. Thank you.
Excellent, Dr. Shada, for that clarification. Very important, the last reference to this differentiation between what is included in the blockchain and what is in parallel, and out of blockchain. Related to this question, we have a question from Diana Gutierrez, and she's asking, how is the veracity of the information verified? How can anyone be sure that, let's say, in the case of the chocolate bars, those bars are coming from the Ecuadorian Amazon? Who verifies that if there is no central authority? And maybe just to change the order, I would like to give the floor first to Dr. Shada and then to Carlo.
Yes, thank you. That's a very good question, because there's a good and there are pros and cons to every platform. When you get rid of the man in the middle and the management and the hierarchy, where you have someone controlling the flow of information, the results and the verification of it, you definitely need another mechanism to guarantee that things will run smoothly without chaos. And this is when they invented those consensus protocols. There are different protocols of how deciding before signing up to any blockchain infrastructure or solution. They decide, all those coming or building that platform, deciding the protocol of a consensus protocol. For example, in the Bitcoin, it's coming from the miners, or those who does the mathematical computation on the computers, and deciding who's going to actually be how the winning, or who's the individual miner who will actually add the block to the unit, who has more computational mathematical, solving the mathematical problem. This is one way of doing it. Other ways of doing it are definitely has nothing to do with computations, but to do with some of them, how many votes they have in the network. So it's a totally different consensus protocol and mechanism, and the others use the computational one. So those are the rules on how the block unit will be added, and they can be applied differently based on the protocol. On the application domain of it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shada. Carlo, do you want to add something in the case of the chocolate bars?
Yes, well, no, I mean, that was amazing, and an amazing explanation, which actually I didn't have a very technical and specific answer to that. So I think that that resumed everything great. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Carlo. Couple, 2 or 3 more questions that we have here from the attendees, from the audience.
Alejandro, do you mind me just interrupting by saying one more comment? There's something they call the smart contract. Is another element and component of blockchain that logically, not technically, decides how the whole blockchain platform, data and rules, business rules are going to be implemented. For example, deciding whether after receiving the treatment from a hospital, or the drugs from a hospital pharmacy, this is when another transaction starts. So these are the logical components that decides how this is going to work. But they all agree to it as parties within the network. No single man or single authority decides that. It's between everyone before entering into the network or participating in the network. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very important comment and clarification. Let me just put to you a couple of more questions before we conclude. And of course, other questions that you are bringing, we don't have the specific data right now, but we can put it in the community, and therefore we can start to answer those questions through the global ABS community, the community of practice. So one of the questions is whether do we consider using the blockchain for digital sequence information on genetic resources in this project? Definitely, it's one of the hot issues now at the international level. And blockchain, as it was clearly introduced by Dr. Shada in her first intervention, can cover assets, physical assets, but also non-tangible assets, like the case of Bitcoin, or currency. So yes, definitely, we believe it can be very useful for tackling that issue as well. One of our colleagues, Fuad Berjigi, from the project, the Global ABS project, is asking, one second, because it jumped just the screen. What is the cost for establishing a permissioned BC platform using Hyperledger Fabric? How long does it take for a BC developer to building on the top of pre-designed infrastructures? This is a very technical question, Dr. Shada. I don't know whether you can quickly reply to that.
It depends on the complexity of the use case. I mean, I myself started learning about blockchain just a year ago, and there's a lot to learn, and I still have a lot, to wrap my head around. It depends exactly on the complexity of the application and the familiarity of the programming skills of this platform and the other platform. I mean, the blockchain platform and the other platform that you're actually building into it. There are other infrastructures that is hard to incorporate or integrate the blockchain into if they don't have the flexibility of legacy systems. So it really, really depends and varies. But technically learning, Solidity is the programming language used for smart contract programming. To program a smart contract, use that programming language. And in order, you can actually implement the blockchain using interface like Hyperledger. The IBM one has an interface where it allows you to do things without writing a code, but also, writing specific code for the application itself, but not the blockchain. It will have it. It will give you the ability to do that using an interface from IBM cloud service. If you use Ethereum platform, which allows you to build the blockchain things, you can use these things using the environment, technical. So it's really similar as any new any new programming language that you learn and any solution that you try to build. It's nothing much. It depends on your past experience.
Thank you so much. That was, again, very, very clear. And I understand that depends very much on the circumstances and the case, the project, and also some of the impacts, as you mentioned in your previous interventions, depends also on the kind of protocol that needs to be used. Huh? Excellent. We have all the questions. We are going to reply through our platform to them, but we have been already using 1 hour. So at this point, we wanted to conclude. Before doing that, let me indicate that we are planning to have another webinar on 8th of March, celebrating International Women's Day, and the 2019 theme this year, Balance for Better, with the presentation of a webinar called Think Equal, Build Smart, Innovate for Change. During this webinar, we will be introducing the Gender Toolkit developed by the Global ABS project and featuring the Mind Your Step Gender Tool. So we are going to send you shortly the invitation, and we hope that you can also join us for that webinar. The webinar is going to be available at the Global ABS community, so please join the community. Thank you once again to our speakers and to all the attendees for your interest in this topic. And we expect to continue this discussion in our global ABS community platform. So please join the community. Thank you so much for your kind attention, and bye-bye.